So, the greatest investment we can make isn't in technology, it's in people. Technology changes every year, people change generations. And that's what we want to get into talking about today, the future of work, purpose, and the opportunities here in the state of Hawaii. I have a specialist here with me today, a huge, very deep background in workforce development, culture, and ways of helping us establish better communities and better families. His name is Vince Kimura. Vince, welcome to the show.
Hey, Brian, thanks so much for having me on. Workforce development has been, I would say, a newer component in the last about 4 years of my career. And I've spent my entire career working across startups, higher education, government, and especially the private sector. And if there's one lesson that stayed with me, it's this: every meaningful change starts with investing in people. I spend a lot of time talking about technology and economic development and innovation. And, behind every breakthrough is an individual who believed in another person's potential. And if we help move more people to discover what they're capable of and give them the opportunity to act on that, we don't just change individual lives. We strengthen that families, the businesses, the communities. That's the kind of legacy worth building. And that's what excites me so much in working in and under the term of workforce development.
Makes perfect sense. So I want to dive a little bit deeper into one aspect of that, and that's really how within certain cultures, certain things are seen a certain way, especially generationally, and how that plays into the arena you work in with workforce development, having the opportunity to live abroad, go to school abroad throughout your career.
I think that's really the big area. And there's this really famous quote, I think it was from Jim Collins, Good to Great, talking about how culture eats strategy for breakfast. And that really kind of stuck with me because, as you mentioned, being from Hawaii, however, growing up abroad, living abroad as a child, and then working abroad as an adult, living within different cultures, whether it's, economic development with PBEC or KPMG, which is, major consulting company, working for a lot of nonprofits, working for, again, that both that big business as well as state institutions, which I'm at right now at the University of Hawaii, within workforce development. And that has been really fascinating on the professional side. And then thinking about all the different cultures that I was a part of, whether it's Rotary or it's the Freemasons, or it's, more recently in the last couple of years, this personal growth, personal development culture, to which is PSI. And then going down the whole rabbit hole of learning how all of this information and these themes, they're not new, right? This has been around for decades and decades and decades. And, being a huge history buff and just loving to learn why and how, and there's these things repeat, the cycles repeat. And then tying it now to jobs and careers and happiness and supporting, it's not about jobs, it's really about supporting career pathways. And I talk about this all the time and say this where, how do we inspire the uninspired? That's really where I see workforce development coming into play, where success isn't just looking at, okay, I'm going to train this person to do this one skill. Success is looking at the individual in their holistic, entirety and saying, okay, how do I build trust with this individual? And then how do I support them unconditionally, no matter what the job function they're currently doing, so that they can see and feel, especially in this younger generation, right? I would say my generation and younger, they feel valued. They feel like they're having an impact on society, not just themselves too, right? It goes beyond just making money. And that's what we start looking at and define, well, what does success look like?
So you mentioned earlier that you grew up in Hawaii, you had a chance to live abroad, you're back here, you're woven into the community here, working for the university system. What are some of the greatest challenges that you see here for the state of Hawaii?
Mm. Well, definitely the shift in generational thought, and you can see that in the political scene too. You can see it in those decision makers. Looking at other cultures where um, I would say a younger generation is making the decisions for all, both politically or economically, et cetera. It's giving them the chance, and also what's missing, which has been my platform the last couple of years, is creating more opportunities for that trust building. We call it mentorship. Um, it's funny how mentorship has played such a huge role in my life, and yet the answer for improving, changing, evolving workforce development is mentorship. It's literally, you know, let's call it educating our senior generations, as well as educating our younger generations to understand and have empathy for the different generations. And I definitely credit that to the fact that my grandparents raised me. I love the fact that I built this great bond and trust, and I didn't shy away from it, or I didn't feel like, it was a bad or good thing. It was just, I respected my kapuna, and similar to being a father and growing up in that culture, it's fascinating to learn, more about, um, the differences of that generation and parent raising, and then my generation and raising kids. And like that has been a huge cultural shift for me, which has definitely changed the way I look at younger individuals. It's seeing them and validating their opinion and how they see the world today, versus saying, oh, uh, the typical comment now is, resiliency, or some of the comments around, will or effort or whatever it is. Usually they're negative comments, versus saying, they are their own individuals, their own people, and we have to value and learn from them in order to build trust.
Based on your energy and how you're delivering this, you're very obviously optimistic and hopeful about what's opportunities out there, especially for younger people. What keeps you optimistic in that fashion? What's driving that passion within you?
You know, going through all of this, and going through like even a divorce right now, and getting to really look at personal growth, personal development, limiting beliefs, and evolve all of that. Like it's all interconnected. There's nothing that's like separate and siloed with when I look at my personal career, and then also how I support others. Because, at the end of the day, in talking to employers, both on the public and private side, they're all saying the same thing. It's like, Vince, we can teach the skills. What we really need support on is, can you do a class on helping our employees show up on time? So it comes down to really integrity, and uh, what they think of themselves, how they think of their coworkers, the culture to which is their employment. And for me, if I were to break it down to it, it's like getting comfortable in the uncomfortable, getting comfortable with uncertainty. Like that piece of it, I feel like both on all generations, whether it's again, my parents' generation, the baby boomers, or even my kids' generation, that willingness to accept uncertainty and uncomfortability, and recognize that this is just a part of the path. The journey really, I mean, I think of a lot of the Maya Angelou's, the Deepak Chopra's, or Four Agreements, and think about just understanding that life is a journey and we just have to enjoy the ride.
You also talked about resilience, which I think is a key factor, and they also talking about just getting comfortable with being uncomfortable and how that plays into certain things. Uh, when you are working with the younger generation, how are you finding that to play out? Are they showing that they have that resilience and strength? What's been your experience as you've gone through that?
The first and foremost one was myself understanding that, um, if I'm bringing biases or prejudgment to their work ethic, or their need for to find a job, or what does a job look like, or what are considered successful jobs too, like that was really fascinating to understand. Is as a parent, or as someone who's mentoring younger generations, it's very different from how I was raised. Looking at, oh, the ideal job is a doctor or a lawyer or someone else who's making high six figures, versus now the younger generation is like, no, like that's not what I want. And for me as a parent, and for me as someone involved in workforce development, really retraining myself, because I don't truly believe, I do not feel like we have a talent shortage. It's really it's a misalignment. We have the opportunity to align something different. And I always mention this too. It's like, really asking, what is the right question? Because I don't feel like the problem of, you know, lots and lots of job openings, et cetera. It's like, well, we can continue to attempt to fit this this type of individual that we want to get this job versus saying maybe we actually need to relook at this completely differently. And that could be distilled down to what a job description is. Definitely, for sure. I mean, just looking at the city and county of Honolulu and the state of Hawaii and the number of vacancies, it's like that would be a telltale. It's like, well, when is the time where we really start taking a hard look at how we realign? What does that look like? And then tie it up to the minimum requirements and the desired qualifications that we do within our educational system too. Another really big thing for the alignment component is focusing on that, again, that holistic side of things. So in the younger generation today, and even my generation, we want to feel like we have that flexibility and we want to feel empowered. And we want the level which is very different from my parents' generation, which is, you live and breathe and die, working. Versus today, it's like, no, I want balance. I want equally as much time to spend with my family and my friends and my loved ones, to travel, versus to, it's like I've got so much vacation days, I never take a break or I never travel. And it's subsequently evident in things like divorce rates or mental health. And so looking at that and being a part of that culture, helping launch a really great program called Seeds of Wellbeing, which is looking at mental health in rural communities, and then expanding that to include first responders too. This is a program out of the University College of Tropical Agriculture and Human Resources, CTAR. It's been really fascinating to learn, because if you just looked at the data point around mental health as an indicator of happiness and fulfillment, um, if you're familiar with countries like Bhutan, the gross national happiness component of that too, that's even a greater indicator really of like, okay, are we on the right path? Are we, really supporting our people, our individuals here, with fulfilling opportunities across the board? Or are we just, putting putting cogs and wheels and saying this is the rest of your life?
So let's look at something specific to the state of Hawaii. And I have a question regarding where do you see from your chair is the greatest challenge? Is it socioeconomic challenges or is it generational cultural challenges? Provide barriers when you're out trying to build these bridges in the community.
It unfortunately or fortunately, it's all of the above. There's not one thing. There's no silver bullet that when you look at these strategic plans that folks are doing in terms of workforce development. And if I had to choose between them, I would definitely do the kind of cultural side of things. Um, because at the end of the day, if we do not have buy-in and build those trusts with those individuals, whether they're young or old, then we could just keep talking. We can keep talking and saying we should do this versus like people actually stepping up and doing it. And there's been really a lot of great success stories. There's just one over in Waiʻanae, which, when they launched, it was 100% employment outcomes. And when you look at the success of that program of taking, students, right, seniors of high school, in some fairly challenging communities, and investing in them, mentoring them, showing them, removing the barriers. This is a great Native Hawaiian organization that, really did things very differently. And I feel like that model has huge implications on a lot of other, you know, trades, like skill, especially skilled trades. Um, that's the one area that crosses both construction, agriculture, and beyond, that it doesn't really benefit you to most degree to get a 4-year degree. And then of course there's other factors too. When we think about workforce development, it's not just about having a job. It's about, obviously being able to afford and not continue to pay rent, right? So getting out of the rat race. So that's that social economic component as well. Feeling like you belong is another thing too, and making sure that one is building, friends and family and a culture in all sides, right? It's not just in the family familial culture. It's in the workplace culture. It could be in the spiritual culture, wherever it is.
Got it. So let's shift gears here for a second, because one of the things I want to definitely get into, and you mentioned talking about skills, you can't go anywhere today without AI coming up as
Mm,
part of the conversation. So, what have you heard in your areas where you're working? What are some of the things that maybe scare you, or maybe scare some of the potential folks that are looking at getting into the workforce in that capacity?
yeah, it's my belief AI will not replace people. It's really people using AI and seeing how things can be done more efficiently and effectively. Like I love using AI. It's fascinating because it just provides me more ways of looking at things and data, more insights. And I'm just a novice user compared to others who really have embraced AI. Definitely has helped me think differently. Um, has definitely helped me my communication. Has helped me pause and look at my leadership too, and what I'm missing in terms of what other data is out there. Um, when you're looking at like lots of data points and you need something to kind of look follow through, like AI is great, and there's a lot of commentary on the future of work and workforce development, and there's also a lot of push in educating everyone on the use of AI. So it's raising the right, that tide for everyone. And then there's the flip side, because there's those that are resistant to change or learning the new tools, and then there's the folks that are just like completely embraced it. And again, going back to that ebb and flow model, um, I feel like talking about AI in the positive way and how I can use it, and that's a part of the cultural shift as well, the mindset shift. It's really looking at, oh, here's all the great things you can do using it. And then also factoring in the ethical side of the things where it's like, okay, even yes, this is great, and there's also cons. Don't just look at the cons. Look at the both of them and weigh that for each person.
When we first started this, we started with the comment of, one of the greatest investments that you could make is people, not technology. However, technology is definitely a great economic engine that can certainly help from a workforce development standpoint. Where do you see Hawaii and Hawaii's technology future, and how does that play into the work that you do?
It's really interesting because we for decades and decades through tax credits and through all these things, Hawaii has been pushing to get more of this, let's call it higher end tech engineers and workforce. You know, when I look at other successful industries, and again, I'm looking for patterns, I'm looking for insights here. You know, it's been really interesting to see what has worked and then what has been stagnant. And R&D in Hawaii, especially for things like agriculture or anything that has to do with the environment, anything really, it's across the board. Hawaii really can step up and play that tech, engineering, etc., including the expanding that out to even to like the film side of things, the brand of Hawaii. So when I think about investing in people and I look at, okay, so how do we pull that? Um, it's it's unfortunate and fortunate that Hawaii's primary industry is tourism, and yet it's also an opportunity where allowing someone, because tourism as a industry, and I grew up in the hotel industry my entire childhood. One great skill about that is people skills, and understanding, because it's a service based industry. Imagine marrying that service-based industry with the technical skills and other things, and you basically have the most ideal employee or workforce, because not only do you have the technical capabilities, you also have the ability to be able to enroll and bring others to it. And that's the one thing, thinking about my hospitality culture of growing up there, Hawaii was on the map because all the leaders within the hospitality industry had come through Hawaii at some stint, um, all the big hotels, because it was the perfect training ground for really understanding what great service looks like. And then you can look at it in other areas. You can look at it from the technical side of GMO or seed companies, which is, there's been always a battle of that. What is GMO versus non, and it's the truth, which is DuPont, Syngenta, Pioneer, all the big seed companies all really thrived in Hawaii because they were able to bring the technical side here and work with the environmental. The fact that we have more microclimates than else in the world. And I see, really a future of workforce development of being that. It's like, you know, empowering individuals who already have the soft skills or the people skills with more of that technical skills. And it's probably not going to be advanced. It's going to be very, I'd say, rudimentary or basic technical skills. So that could be things like automotive, that could be data analysis, that could be so many different ways. Because when you expand that I would say community or that population, it's inevitable that folks will start moving higher and higher and higher. And that even raises the whole conversation, which people keep talking about, which is, uh, reducing the amount of individuals going off to the continent or elsewhere to get advanced degrees. I personally take a very, I would call it a Singaporean view, which is an economic strategy that they did decades and decades ago, which is actually encourage that with the idea that one day, sooner when you want to take care of your parents or grandparents or raise a family, come back. And, we talk about the whole come on come home component too, which is very deeply engraved in workforce development. And I think, it's the opportunities abroad or on the continent are so much greater. And we keep saying we're going to do this or we should do this as a negative thing versus actually embracing it, saying, how do we actually leverage this more? How do we actually look at this as a positive way where we can have folks come back more frequently? Maybe they're not living here. However, it's like, how do we look at this way? Because from a purely economic, let's just call it, monetary side of things, that's a secret is getting a lot of those folks who have left to come back and invest and build. And of course, own more of that real estate so that one day they will come back. Maybe it's sooner than later. Or again, we talk about this from the entrepreneurial lens. Besides, entrepreneurship, to me, entrepreneurship actually equals hope. To me, entrepreneurship is that mindset. And, you know, I was very gracious to support a number of individuals bringing design thinking to Hawaii, almost 2 decades ago. And just that mindset and way of thinking is that shift. And it's been decades since. So a number of students or individuals who've been kind of gone through the process and understanding, and that mindset is huge. So being able to bring more of that and see and invest in people and realize that success in Hawaii actually is someone who has multiple jobs. Maybe they have a W-2 and they have a 1099, and then evolve that too, which is the most interesting challenge Hawaii, and not just Hawaii, the world's going to face is, in the next 5 years, every single baby boomer will be at Social Security retirement age, and so how does that play into the workforce? And so there'll definitely be a shift and a change in leadership. I feel like it's going to be good and bad. I feel like those organizations who really embrace that transfer of knowledge and that mentorship ability, both internally as well as within the community, are going to thrive. And you'll see a lot of shifting and changes, especially with a lot of family businesses, which Hawaii is very big on. And, a leadership ability to be able to change that and educate not just, public boards of directors, private boards of directors too, of, who is the right individual or individuals in the leadership who will help move this organization into the future? Or will we see, a lot of those companies, organizations that Jim Collins, Good to Great, or others have looked at? It's like there'll just be an evolution, a change in guard, an ebb and flow. So really fascinating time.
Oh, definitely. And that takes me to something I wanted to get into next, specifically talking about obviously our remote geographic location, just here in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. When we start talking about sustainability, and what does that look like? What are your thoughts about sustainability in two primary areas? One is obviously people, and how we, as you were talking earlier, retain and or have them come back. And then also technology. How do we start to get more of a technology engine here in Hawaii? Because I think we are in a good location for the Pacific Rim to be able to do that. What are your thoughts on that?
On the people side, it's champions. Like it's finding those individuals. And again, this is not new. We've done this throughout time. It's stories. It's individual stories that we use. We tell others, whether it's our kids when they're young or whatnot. And that's the thing that I love most about my experience and those mentors that I've had in my career, my life, is I tell their stories. And I've had a number of opportunities, when I was teaching a class at Richardson Law School, and I just was like, well, yes, you can hear these stories from me. However, it wouldn't be better to hear it from them. And it was so much fun. I brought in like, gosh, I think about 2 dozen different mentors of folks who just are amazing, and allowing the participants in their J term semester to hear it straight from, quote unquote, the horse's mouth, and have dialogue and interest and play with that. Um, it's been really fascinating. So really bringing the champions, sharing their stories, and that's actually the thing that I feel like is really missing in workforce development in Hawaii and changing that culture, is taking those stories abroad to the world. We hear so often we would bring in individuals from other parts and have them be keynote speakers here, which is great, right? Sharing of information, sharing of knowledge. I've loved having a lot of these individuals kind of like who I probably never would have thought of or heard of, and really helped expand my own mindset. And then the flip side of it is actually grooming individuals locally and having them be, it's almost like a speakers bureau, we can call it. And we're just sharing information now. Like there's some pretty phenomenal individuals who have come through Hawaii, who we can bring back, who Hawaii is a special place for them. And then we can have our folks go back out there and start sharing this. On the second side of that, the other side of that sustainability, the technology side, it's really an infrastructure play. I think looking at energy, that's always the biggest thing, because we can reduce the cost of energy, both for construction as well as for operations. We have a competitive advantage. So looking at ways of doing things, maybe it's storage of energy. The government, both on the federal side as well as the Department of Defense side, has always looked at ways of using Hawaii as that model here, just because we house the largest military operation in the world, PACOM. So that also plays to a really fun advantage and a really positive competitive advantage of doing a lot of the testing and R&D here, where we're able to essentially work with all aspects of the federal and military government too, of seeing how things will evolve, right? Even when we look at the shifting in defense innovation procurement, which has shifted over the last 2 decades too. Technology no longer is something where the US government completely owns, because they're not able to shift and evolve it quickly enough, and then obviously make changes to it. So the term dual use, which Hawaii plays a really big role in on military technologies, is that ability for entrepreneurs, startup companies, to not just look at the federal government as their largest employer, to look at also the commercial sector or other counties, both city county Honolulu or other counties too, as potential employers and clients. That's a really great thing too. And Hawaii has always kept pushing the needle a little bit further. And obviously there's a huge potential in that, on the workforce training side, whether it's maritime or space.
I have one last question, and we've covered a lot of territory. We've
Mm,
obviously had a lot of data points that we've put out there, and a lot of information just to kind of digest. So my question is this: what advice would you give to someone in their 20s, just based on what we've shared today, and what would be the takeaways that you feel would be the most relevant for them?
yeah, it comes down to lifelong learning. Like stay curious. I think that's the one thing when I think about, my own career and how I have always loved interacting with both my kapuna who have great stories, as well as the younger generation, you know, always realizing that there's always change, and me staying curious and uncomfortable and being comfortable in the comfortable is the key. If I'm not growing, I'm dying, right? This is that whole like growth versus decay thing. Definitely relationships matter. And it wasn't until, I would say, fairly recently, in the last couple of years, since I started doing this, the PSI work, the basic and the advanced courses, where I really kind of got a hard look at how I'm showing up, both for myself first, to my family, my kids, to my parents, to my friends, and to the outside world. And I I'll be honest, it was not a very pretty picture of like how I'm showing up. And that was something where I really had to take a hard look at. I'm like, well, what do I really want? Like, what is, you know, because my life is never dictated where I know I'm gonna die at, 80 or 90 or whatever it is. That's the whole carpe diem of like, okay, who are the relationships that I want to be connected to? And then how is it that I'm both asking for support, which is something that was really difficult in the beginning, as well as open to receiving support. And so that those relationship side of things is, at the end of the day, it's really all that matters. And then the other thing too that I've learned, having gone through multiple different kind of industries and careers, and I would often chase titles, and I would chase awards. And it's interesting, once I went through the 20 for the next 20 and the 40 for the next 40 and power this and featured in books and all these things, it's like at the end of the day, none of that really matters. Like, it's great. It definitely built my self-confidence, in one side. It was me understanding my history and my past and my limiting beliefs and my programs, and really deciding, am I really growing, both emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually? Like, that's the piece. And then where am I not spending time? Like, where am I lacking? Where am I feeling imbalanced or unbalanced? Um, am I making time for myself first and foremost, which, in the past I would not. And then prioritizing where I spend that time. I think that's really the big thing. Um, I definitely would have given, and the other thing too, is funny, is because me or someone in my 20s, like, all this information, it was already told to me. It's just a matter of, I needed to go and live this and experience this, and for me to truly understand that. And the other thing I would say, besides that relationship side, is really understanding the concept around, we are the sum of the five people we surround ourselves with, and their values and what they think of themselves, how they think of others, how they think of the world, and just recognizing, are they, for kind of the term is Debbie Downer. Are they always very negative or energy vampires, or are they, building themselves up, building others up? How are they contributing to their community? Like, that was the greatest aha. And then recognizing that I have a choice, and throughout it, all the things that I learned in my 20s and 30s and now 40s is me evolving and growing, and just loving and enjoying life every day.
So we're going to close this out. And what I'd like to do at this point is there something that you would like to share that I didn't get to with the questions and you haven't brought to the table yet, just to kind of wrap this up?
Because I work within the University of Hawaiʻi system, and whether it's from innovation commercialization to law school to community colleges at the system level, to now actually supporting a community college, Leeward, and establishing a new program for skilled trades in agriculture and technology and business and whatnot. The theme around workforce development is, it's such a key buzzword now. And you know it's it's understanding that learning is no longer preparation for work. It's learning is the work, and helping others, whatever generation they come from, both young and old, understand and fall in love with that, is really the key. And it's so much fun. It's so gratifying, to work with other individuals who think differently, and there's some amazing individuals doing this. And yeah, just encouraging you out there who's listening into this one. It's like when I got frustrated, feeling like I was alone, it wasn't actually true. It's just I wasn't a part of that culture and connected to that culture. So me attending, experiencing, learning, taking classes, bettering myself. Um, my filter now is how uncomfortable am I? And if I'm uncomfortable, it means I'm doing the right thing. If I'm comfortable, that means I'm like, oh, I'm just status quo. So definitely the theme of getting comfortable in the uncomfortable, I think about it daily. I always check in, and I wonder how many uncomfortable experiences have I experienced this week alone.
Thank you for sharing that. It's been a fantastic talking with you today. And if there's anything I can do from my chair on my platform can do to support you, I'm 100% behind it because what the work you're doing is priceless. And the thing that I love to see is your optimism, your belief, and your commitment. And those are all second to none. So again, thank you for your time today. And until we do this again, take care. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Brad, for having me.